people ask, like, what is a good HRV score? You know, they say your heart rate, you want between like 40 and 60 beats per minute. There is no range on HRV because there is no ceiling, which means you could keep improving your HRV till who knows how long. I mean, I believe until you essentially ascend, right? But there is no range, and the worst thing you could do is compare to someone else. So what's more important is to understand your HRV baseline, which I define as your average HRV score the last 30 days, right? And if you know what that average is, you know where your nervous system has been at when you wake up, and if you have a score higher than your baseline, that's your nervous system telling you, hey, I feel very relaxed, I feel ready, you could go push me today. Go have a workout that's more challenging. Go have that conversation that's more challenging, right? It's giving you permission to go work it out. If you wake up and it's lower than your baseline, that's your HRV telling you, you put more of a load on my body than I've been used to the last 30 days. It's not a bad thing, honor it. Don't do that again. Do something that fills you up.
Salim, thank you for joining.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, man.
Yeah,
it's a pleasure.
I appreciate you being here. So we got connected earlier this week through Adam Greenfeld, who, for anyone listening, he was on episode 2. And Adam's like, you got to have Salim on the show. Talk about HRV. I'm like, HRV, I know, heart rate variability. I know about that because my mattress, my 8-sleep mattress tracks it. And that was about the extent to my knowledge of HRV. And then in doing research for this episode, I'm like, holy shit, there's a lot here. From what I've gathered and understood in the last few days is this is the most important metric for tracking our health, as you put it, like the number one barometer for just how's your health as a whole. So to kick off, I'm curious, who are you? But also, why is no one really aware of HRV? We're all tracking our steps, tracking our hours of sleep, but yet it seems like the most important metric is the most overlooked one. How do we kick that off?
Yeah. All great questions, and we'll dive into it all, but I just want to acknowledge that you, even when Adam told you what HRV was, you're like, oh yeah, heart rate variability. That's, I'd say, 80% better than most people when I say, have you heard of HRV? They haven't even heard of it, right? That's how much under the radar it's been, and why I've been so deeply passionate about sharing and educating and making people aware of it, because I believe, and I'll get into the details why, it is the most important barometer in health. The first question is, what is it, right? We know it stands for heart rate variability, but what does that mean? Most people think, oh yeah, heart rate between 40 and 60 beats per minute. It's not that. Heart rate variability is measuring the variance or the gap between each of those beats. So if your heart's beating at 44 beats per minute, there's 44 different variabilities in each of those beats, right? So that is changing constantly all the time. What that's indicating is how your heart is managing its perceived changing environment. And I say perceived because I believe, and we'll get into some science why, everything we see is all where our attention is going, right? This is, I call it an educational simulation that we are living in to get to know us more, right? And so essentially, HRV is a direct reflection of your relationship to your perceived stress and the health of your autonomic nervous system and its agility to go from a sympathetic fight or flight state to a parasympathetic rest and digest state, right? And so why I believe it's the most important barometer is because we know on a cellular level, in this reality that we live in, we all age, get disease, and eventually die from stress. Period, end of story. Stress is the root cause of everything unless you die in an accident, right? Why is that? Because that's a big bracket statement. Because staying in a prolonged high beta sympathetic state over time leads to inflammation on a cellular level. I'm going to get just a little geeky to explain why.
Go there.
Okay.
Yeah.
First,
let's do the pop neuroscience, the pop physiology, the whole thing.
The autonomic nervous system, right? I'm not sure. It sounds like, I'm not sure how much your audience is familiar or not familiar with it, but it to me is the most intricate system that we know so little about, but it governs 90% of all of our voluntary and involuntary functions, like breath, like digestion, like your heart, right? So it's a system that's constantly working that we know so little about. And it operates in two primary states, that sympathetic fight or flight state and the parasympathetic rest and digest state, right? And we evolved creating this sympathetic fight or flight state because we were living in a jungle. And at any given time, we need to actually turn on to survive, right? To either fight, freeze, or flee, right? What is happening physiologically when you go into this state is your amygdala is firing off saying life or death situation, and it's sending all of the oxygen in your blood away from the visceral organs. And by visceral, I mean your heart, your digestion, your lungs, into the extremities so it could survive, which we want it to do. That makes sense if there's a saber-toothed tiger and we need to run and it's the middle of the day, or if it's at nighttime, we need to turn on, right?
I love how we always use the saber-toothed tiger as the example.
It is funny. You're right.
No
There's
lion.
so many other things.
Woolly man. I was a saber-tooth.
Yeah.
Okay,
It's funny. Someone actually asked me, what if it was something else when I was giving a talk once? And I was like, yeah, that works too.
Scorpion even
whatever
would be
you
pretty
want.
aggressive as well.
Whatever you want.
Okay, go on.
And so after running from that saber-tooth tiger or scorpion, you do that for maybe an hour, and then you're back to relaxing and dropping in a parasympathetic state. So all that oxygen can go back to your visceral organs so your body can operate and do the things it needs to do. Fast forward to today, we wake up from our deepest parasympathetic state of sleep, because when you're sleeping, your brain is oscillating in delta, right, which is one of the frequencies of that parasympathetic state. We look at our phone, we go into work, and we stay in this mind-made, perceived stressful life or death state for 8, 10, 12 hours a day until we go back home and go to sleep, right? And so that means during the day, you're not actually in a real life or death situation, right? You are in a mind-made, stressful, like you're fine. You're not actually going to die, but you think you're worried because of all these external things, that your body, the entire time that amygdala is firing off, sending all of its vital oxygen to the extremities, away from your digestion, away from your lungs, away from your heart. And staying in that state consistently over time will start to lead to inflammation because your body can't actually maintain and do its things. So that's just like a quick synopsis of why stress on a cellular level ends up leading to aging and disease, right? And so if you want to optimize for longevity and health, then being able to monitor your stress and have a relationship with it that is healthy, that gets you out of that stressful state throughout the day is crucial for that. And HRV is a measure of that.
Okay.
So you could actually track it.
What are your favorite tools to track it?
So there are so many different wearables out there to track. You mentioned the 8 Sleep, which does as well. I have an Oura Ring just because it's minimalist and I like it. There's Whoop, there's Apple Watch. Athletes wear like a professional strap and all the things. To me, all that matters is actually tracking it, because it's not the accuracy of the device as much as knowing your baseline. So that's the next thing people ask, like, what is a good HRV score, right? They say your heart rate, you want between like 40 and 60 beats per minute. There is no range on HRV because there is no ceiling, which means you could keep improving your HRV till who knows how long. I mean, I believe until you essentially ascend, right? But there is no range, and the worst thing you could do is compare to someone else. 2 things I just want to point out. One, the higher the HRV score, the healthier the nervous system, which is counterintuitive because like heart rate, you think the lower heart rate usually is better.
Meaning the more distance between beats, the healthier.
Exactly. The more variance, because that variance doesn't maintain every beat, right? It's just measuring the gap between each one. And you want more of a variance because that means your heart and your nervous system is more malleable to handle more of the perceived change that's happening. So the higher the gap, the healthier it is to handle more, right? And so you could keep improving your HRV so that that variance and gap over time improves, right? And so, just super critical to understand that. And comparing is actually one of the worst things you could do for your HRV score, because I tell people, and I'm caveating on this before I share, my baseline is typically between 160, 180, right? Some of my clients, when I start with, are down at 19, and people, when they hear mine, they're like, oh my God, am I dying? Mine has been, if I've been sick, as low as 9. After I had my shoulder injury, it was like 30. Like, it is really a reflection of what is happening in your day-to-day life. So what's more important is to understand your HRV baseline, which I define as your average HRV score the last 30 days, right? And if you know what that average is, you know where your nervous system has been at when you wake up. And if you have a score higher than your baseline, that's your nervous system telling you, hey, I feel very relaxed. I feel ready. You could go push me today. Go have a workout that's more challenging. Go have that conversation that's more challenging, right? It's giving you permission to go work it out. If you wake up and it's lower than your baseline, that's your HRV telling you, your heart telling you, you put more of a load on my body than I've been used to the last 30 days. It's not a bad thing. Honor it. Don't do that again. Do something that fills you up.
Yeah.
Right?
Let's start with your backstory here. What, throughout your life, being a kid, teenager, young adult, what has been your relationship with stress and how has it evolved? And then since you learned all this and started realizing, like, oh, wow, I can be more on top of this. I can lead my stress versus be a reactive to it.
Totally.
How has then that changed your life?
Oh, man. Great question. I guess let me give a high level of my story. So I grew up, I'm first generation Lebanese. Both my parents are from Lebanon, and I'm the oldest of three. And my father passed away at a young age when I was 7, which put me very much in this masculine parental father figure role, because our culture is very much patriarchal and masculine dominant, especially the oldest son.
Yep.
And so I've always had this story in my head that it's my job to support, to sacrifice, to do, to produce, right? And so that story still is painted in my everyday life. And I went to school for engineering, because if you're Lebanese, you're either a lawyer, a doctor, or an engineer. And my dad was a PhD in chemical engineering.
Where'd you grow up and where'd you go to school?
Grew up in New York, Hudson Valley.
Whereabouts?
Fishkill, Wappingers. You familiar?
From Westchester.
Oh, man, we're in Westchester.
Ardsley.
Oh, yeah. I know Ardsley. We played them in lacrosse.
Oh, yeah. We may have been on the field at the same time. It's possible.
05 high school.
Okay. I was a little bit younger than you.
Okay.
Years.
And then I ended up graduating high school. I went to RPI, one of the biggest nerd engineering schools. Halfway through college, I'll never forget, I called my mom and I'm like, Mom, I don't want to be an engineer. I'm a people person. Just because I'm like good at math and science, I don't want to do it. She's like, you're going to finish this and then you do whatever you want after. It's the best thing she could have told me, because I graduated in 09 and the economy tanked in 08 and there was barely any business jobs, but the only job I could get actually was an engineer at Indian Point, the nuclear power plant in Peekskill, Westchester, that powers most of New York City. So I graduated college and I worked at a nuclear power plant for 5.5 years. When I graduated college, it was that first year at the power plant that was the beginning, I say, of my health journey, because at the time I had never processed my dad's passing. I was too young when it happened, and then never really actually sat and thought he passed away from cancer. But when I graduated college, my grandma got breast cancer, and she was like my second mom. And to me, it was like the first time I was like, wow, everybody I know has been deeply impacted by this thing called cancer. What is going on? Let me do some research on it. And I started researching, and it was wild what I found. And I came across this Dr. Tullio Simoncelli, who has supported so many people in their cancer journey with baking soda, sodium bicarbonate, because he believes that cancer cannot thrive in an alkaline, oxygen-rich environment. And most of us, especially in America, are very acidic because of the processed food and the seed oils and all the things that we consume, right? And I was just so mind blown at all these YouTube testimonials of him supporting people. I say supporting because I'm very cautious with the words that you use, on their cancer journey with just baking soda injections or baking soda protocol, right? And to me, it was the first time I realized that we see what people want us to see, and there's so much more out there. And it just took my engineering curious mind on a deep dive of research into health and wellness, which started out with my diet, right? And so I did everything from tried vegan, vegetarian, landed on pescatarian for like 4.5 years.
This is your early 20s.
This is my early 20s, yeah. And then it was about 25, when I was 25, so like 12 years ago, I came across ketosis or keto. Before, I believe the industry ruined it. And it just clicked that, wow, okay, I cut out sugar. My body will burn fat for energy, produce ketones. My brain is made of 70% fat. Like, this makes sense. Let me try it. And I fell in love with the clarity and the energy. And at the time was still in my type A masculine, I need to do extreme phase, right? So I was very extreme in that. And as I started that journey, the biohacking movement started, right? And it was also a time when my colleague at the power plant approached me, and I was looking to get out of the power plant and do something on my own, and was investing in real estate, but wanted to find something I was passionate about. And I was clearly passionate about health and wellness. And he brought, because I had totally cut out sugar, I was only drinking water and unsweetened tea. We drink unsweetened tea together, yerba mate specifically. And he one day brought in a cold, sparkling yerba mate for me to try. And it was love at first sip. And I was like, oh my God, this is the idea.
Yeah.
And so we started moonlighting on the side. And now 11 and a half years ago, we launched what is known as Sound, which is an unsweetened sparkling tea company.
Cool.
Right. And the name Sound comes from sound as an adjective: sound body, sound mind, sound missions, sound ingredients. Really, our mission was to bring transparency and education into the beverage space. Right.
Yep. It's funny because I also vividly remember the first time I had the sparkling yerba mate. I was like, this is really good.
Which the guayaki one, or
Yeah.
They're great. So ended up quitting the power plant job to go all in on that. Still very focused on my health journey, and then the biohacking movement starts, which lit me up and the curiosity up, because I was like, oh, there are more ways I could hack to go and optimize and like have more energy. And I just went down every rabbit hole, trying every single thing, reading Dave Asprey, Ben Greenfield, all the things. And at this point, I had moved to New York City to launch the beverage company. And I was showing off that I was sleeping 5 hours a day using all these technologies, running this, like raising money for this beverage company from 170 people, and like never stopping, like go, like most entrepreneurs do, like thinking I am winning, right? Running 10 miles every other day, never stopping, listening to audiobooks. 5 years of doing that, and it was 5 like intense years of stuff I used to eat one meal a day and once a week do a 48-hour fast. I like just crazy things.
The picture of everything, we're like,
yeah.
We didn't know at the time.
We did not know at the time.
But
We did not know at the time. And then after 5 years of doing that, my body so beautifully spoke up and my knee gave out from just never pausing. And that was the beginning, I say, of my inward journey, right? And I was forced, actually, because I was so addicted to sweating and the endorphin release of running, that I found Bikram yoga, and 90 minutes, the first time ever in my life, my mind was forced to shut the right? Like actually. And I started reading these, I was already reading, but reading different kinds of books. And it was actually Dr. Joe Dispenza's book, Becoming Supernatural, was the first time that I had seen HRV explained. And he briefly touches on it in the beginning about how it relates to stress. I had an Oura ring at the time, and similar to what you just shared about your 8 sleep, like you see this metric, but you don't know what it is. All I cared about on my Oura ring was my readiness score and my sleep score, right? HRV's there, but I didn't even know what it meant, really. And when I read in that book that it relates to stress, a light bulb went off, because I also was very deeply associated and partnered with a company called Newcom, which is, it uses binaural beats. Are you familiar with binaural beats?
No. Okay.
Binaural beats is it's phenomenon that's been around for a long time, and it's where you take 2 different frequencies and you put them in each ear, and it entraps your brain into a certain frequency. To wind back to the sympathetic parasympathetic state, I didn't mention that each of those states correlates with different brain waves. So if you're in a sympathetic state, which is known as the beta state, your brain is oscillating between 14 and 30 hertz. If you're in a parasympathetic state, there's 3 different phases. There's delta, which is when you're sleeping, and your brain is oscillating between 0.5 and 4 hertz. There's theta, which is known as the meditative state, between conscious and unconscious. Your brain is oscillating between 4 and 8 hertz. And then there's alpha, which is known as the flow state, where your brain is oscillating between 8 and 14 hertz. And it's where the monkey mind is off, but you're awake and focused on one thing, an athlete in a flow state, right? And so binaural beats is taking, let's say, 16 hertz in one ear, 10 hertz in the other ear. Your brain gets confused and it chases the delta. So it's entrapping your brain into a desired state, right? And there's a company called Newcom that has a patent on that I became obsessed with and was using as part of my regimen of hacking and only sleeping 5 hours a day. And I knew from my research with them and working with them that on a cellular level, we all age, get disease, and die from stress. And so when I heard HRV measures stress, I'm like, oh, fuck. I don't care about anything else. This was now like 6 years ago. I just want to see how I could improve this metric. And at the time on my Oura ring, it was 30. So first I started doing it the way I do everything, hacking, going, pushing, doing. And then I started to realize, wow, this thing actually moves when I pause, when I go into a parasympathetic state, when I listen to my body. Because HRV is actually telling you how much are you listening, how much are you in your heart, in your body, and out of your mind, right? And I like to think of it as a language in which your heart is always communicating with you. And to just double down on the comparison thing, when you think of a language, you don't think English is better than Spanish, is better than French, right? The intent of a language is for an ecosystem within a community to communicate. The sole intention of HRV is for your heart to communicate with you, right? So if you think, oh my God, I need a better score, that person's better than mine, you're already painting a picture of your reality that is negative or not good, right? And so that's why it's super important to use it as a biofeedback loop. And I find, especially for males who in general are more in our head than females who are more sensitive in their body, for me, it was a tool to learn how to listen to my body, right? And so if you use it in the way I described, when you wake up and you see a score that's lower than your baseline, it's like, wow, what did I do yesterday that maybe my body, I wasn't listening, but my body wasn't liking? Because clearly my body is feeling more stressed than it usually is, right? And are you familiar with kinesiology?
A bit.
Muscle testing,
Yeah.
right? It's an incredible phenomenon. There's a book by Dr. David Hawkins called Power versus Force, where he goes into like the thousands of case studies and research they've proven to show that kinesiology is real. Like our body has an innate wisdom that when presented with something that's harmful for it or dissonant, it will go weak, right? Even the strongest man, it will go weak, right? When presented with something that it likes, it will go strong. HRV is really just that as a number. It is telling you what your body likes and what your body doesn't like with no bias from preconditioning of our minds, right? And so for the past 6 years, I've used HRV to really learn to listen to my body and get more in my body.
All right. Cool.
That was a lot.
No, this is really good. So pre-HRV days to now current and, the past 6 years, life happens. Work gets crazy. You're training for something, like there's stress. How did you used to react and respond before, and now that you are understanding what's going on, what's it like today?
Beautiful question. And before I answer that, I want to answer the question that people ask: how do you improve your HRV, right? Because it goes hand in hand with this question.
Yeah.
Stress is not a bad thing. First off, it's all perceived, I believe, in the simulation. And stress is actually how you improve your HRV. When you go to the gym to work out, you don't just lift the weight that you could lift and that's it. You actually hermetic stress. You go past the point and then you pause and you recover so that you could go do more. Same thing with HRV. You put yourself in perceived stressful situations. You turn on your agency. You turn on your awareness. You take your body from that stress sympathetic state into a parasympathetic state. And now you're telling your heart and nervous system it's safe, it's okay, making it more malleable and resilient to handle more stress. So actually, the doorway to improved HRV is more stress, but done with agency and awareness that it is all perceived, right? And how I took mine from 30 to 180 was staying in arguably the most stressful industry of beverage, continuing to raise money, but consciously, especially throughout the day, dropping into parasympathetic states via biohacking technologies, via cold plunge, right? You get into a cold plunge, what happens? Instantly, stress, anxiety, If you could stay in there, if you can breathe and relax your body into that parasympathetic state, you are HRV training. You're improving your nervous system and its ability to handle more stress, right? So I used my life situation, which I created, right, to work on regulating my nervous system by fluctuating it. And as I mentioned, we wake up normally, most people, and it's just in a hamster wheel of stress until we go to bed. The key is the multiple breaks throughout the day to go into that parasympathetic state, as Huberman talks about all the time, NSDR, non-sleep deep rest, absolutely crucial for optimizing and regulating your nervous system.
So 10-ish years ago, your routine was go, 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 go. A little bit of sleep.
I mean, 5 hours of sleep, right? Showing off, I was getting 5 hours of sleep, never stopping. Now, or during running the beverage, when I was aware of HRV, it would be, okay, back-to-back investor calls, and then 2 minutes of box breathing, and then a half hour of non-sleep deep rest using the binaural beats, lying on a PMF mat with a hydrogen inhalation to totally take me out of here and into here, and then getting out of that and going right back into the calls and the stress, right? It is that fluctuation, which now I work with clients on this, it's important to be aware of it and where your body is, and that's how you improve it over time.
Let's talk a bit about some of the work you do with clients. So first question is, you meet with men that are ambitious. They're high strung. They got a pretty high intensity life, work, relationships, maybe they're building a family. Like they got a lot going on. They probably say, man, I'm fucking stressed. Like
overwhelmed, stressed, all of it. Men and women, by the way. Yeah.
And can you and do you prescribe, like, here's what you should do, or is it really custom to each person?
It is beyond custom to each person, and that has everything to do with what actually HRV is measuring. It's measuring your relationship to your reality, right? And we all have our own stories and our own conditioning, not just from this life, like epigenetics in our genes, like where we came from, all that plays into the picture that we are projecting of the movie screen of our life at all times, right? So there is not one shoe fits all for anybody. And to me, I don't like to think of good or bad or right or wrong. I look at everything as dissonant or resonant because it's all frequency, right? And there's a dissonance for me when I see a teacher or someone saying it's this way or no way, right? Because that may be true for them, but that doesn't mean it's true for me or anyone else, because it's all my relationship to it that makes it true, right? And so what I bring to the table of clients or to friends or anybody is a lot of knowledge, swinging to the extreme of biohacking, and then swinging to the extreme like I did the last 6 years of spiritual, plant medicine, all those other things, and finding out what works and what resonates most with them, right? And it is totally custom for every person, and it changes over time, which is something I didn't learn until last year. I'll give you the example. I became obsessed with Bikram. I moved out here. Sweat yoga was my thing. Literally 1 year, 330 of 365 days, I went to sweat yoga. For 2 years when I was out here, my HRV was still good and like better than most. And I didn't think I was stressed, but I had a sty in my eye for 2 years that I could not get out. I actually got surgery on it. It just never disappeared until last year. I went to Bali and I did an Ayurvedic Pachakarma retreat. And I found out that Pitta is my dosha, which is like a fire dosha. So that means I'm fire. Like I produce a lot of heat, which I know. I run hot. That's why I got an 8 sleep at all times. And I am going every morning for 60 minutes of more fire and heat, right? And your eye is directly connected to your liver, which is the fire organ. And so my sty was my body screaming to me, screaming to me that I am overheating it. But my mind was so addicted to thinking that this was good for me and so stuck on its way that I didn't want to change it. And because I thought it was good, I was getting the release and the energy and everything. But my body was politely telling me with this sty, no, this isn't good for you. And so I have not done a hot yoga. I've done maybe one in the last year and a half. The sty is gone. I'm still in good shape. I feel better than I've ever felt. And it was this belief that it was good that kept me regimented. So you need to trust and listen to what the body is telling you. And that's where I think HRV is the biggest cheat code, because it is your body telling you if you use it like that.
When you start working with someone new, what are the questions that you basically would ask them? And I'm curious because for myself, but also listeners, what can we ask ourselves to start to diagnose where we stand, where to go from here about our own stress?
Yeah, the first thing is just one, if you are measuring HRV, look at what the patterns have been telling you. Look at your monthly data, because you could break it down at least for Aura and Whoop, and I think 8 Sleep, like what it's been every month. See where there's a month that it was high, see where there was a month that it was low, and then remember what you did that month, right? And see, oh, I need to be doing more of that, because it's not just what you eat, it's not just how you work out, it's where you are geographically, it's who you're with, it's what you're watching. All of those factors play into how your heart is perceiving its reality. Right. And so I really try to I have an intake form that's like high-end general questions. And based on those responses, I just get hits on like stories and beliefs that are stuck. Because the only thing that matters at the end of the day is like what is happening in here and the story you're telling yourself. And so you need to be super intentional with the words and with the thoughts. And I want to share a story of just how much HRV is what is going on in here. So 2 years ago on my birthday, sound was like in a very tough place, and we were trying to raise money. We were doing incredible, but the thing with the beverage space is you need a lot of money to keep going. And we had 2,000 retailers open up, flying off shelves. I couldn't keep up with the demand, and it needs a lot of money to produce, right? And I was, getting myself in debt and really trying to continue pushing this like decade-old thing up. And I told myself, which I hear so much from entrepreneurs, I wanted to step into less doing, more being, right? You hear that a lot with people like, man, I'm doing so much. I want to like step out. I want to do less doing, more being, right? I asked for that on my birthday, and my community, in front of everybody I asked, they gifted me a Super 73 e-bike, right? This incredible electronic bike. And I take said bike for its first spin on the Venice Boardwalk, and I have the silliest accident that anteriorly dislocates my right shoulder, fractures 30% of the shoulder socket off and tears my labrum, right?
Your friends are like, dude, we just got to the bike.
I'm like, dude, I just got the bike, like beyond furious. I go to the ER, they have to relocate it. I wake up the next morning and my HRV is 30, right? From my baseline of 180 down to 30. Rightfully so, because I just won a lot of pain, ER, no sleep, and also furious with myself, replaying it. How did this happen?
Okay.
I get on a call with my coach that day. I tell him the story, and he belts out laughing. I'm like, what's so funny? He goes, let's break down the body spiritually. The arms represent the doing. The torso to body represents the being. The shoulder connects the doing to the being. What did I ask for? Less doing, more being.
That's cool.
I got exactly what I asked for from the gift in front of everybody that I asked for it. You have to laugh at just the comical parody of this matrix that we live in. Immediately, my relationship to that accident happening for me changed. I was like, okay, I get it. I need to let go of Sound, the beverage company. I need to stop. I need to go and travel, which is something I've wanted to do for so long, but because of being an entrepreneur and hustling, I never allowed myself to. And I listened, and 24 hours later, same pain, same injury, same everything. I woke up and my HRV score was 97. It tripled only from my relationship to the accident happening for me.
Yeah.
Right? And just to finish that story, because I very much think it plays into entrepreneurs, I traveled to Bali, and every morning I would sit and contemplate this statement, less doing, more being, right? Because I really hear it all the time. People wanting to step into that, which was always tough for me in my mind because I love doing, right? I love being productive. Like, I'm here to do. It's very hard for me not to, right? And it dawned on me, I had an epiphany that the statement, less doing, more being, is mind-made and dualistic in nature. And it implies that doing and being are mutually exclusive. When the reality is, we're always being, even though we're unaware of it 99% of the time. And we're always doing, even if we're sitting or sleeping or breathing, we're still doing, right? So it's not a matter of doing less and being more. What actually matters is the intention in your doing, right? And it brings me to one of my favorite quotes from the Bhagavad Gita, which is like the Hindu version of the Bible. And it says, you have a right to your actions, but never the fruits of your actions. Act for the action's sake, and don't be attached to inaction, right? Meaning, we all came here, I believe, to do, to create, right? We cannot be attached to what happens from that creating. That's what leads to all suffering, right? Any attachment to an outcome will lead to potential suffering based on the mind's expectation of it. Don't be attached to inaction, meaning we didn't come here not to do. Act solely for the sake of the action. Act purely for your intention, for what you're for, and trust that it will work out the way it's supposed to, right? And so that's been the lens that I have tried to live my life every morning by reliving and restating my purpose and what I'm for. And when I work with clients, that ends up being the foundation of just being crystal clear on what you're for, because then everything else can go off of this guiding compass instead of what happens to me, and I know so many other entrepreneurs, overwhelmed because priority and what are we trying to do and all these things. And then you end up doing all these things for something you don't even remember why you started or what the point is, and missing like, okay, you're going to make all this money, but then why did you make all the money? What do you want the money for? And if you're stressed or dead by the time it gets there, what is it for, right? Just being super clear on the intention, what you're doing, very much helps paint the picture and the reality that you want.
You mentioned something that piques my curiosity. First, you mentioned the story of stopping sweat yoga. Very much like, I'm going to stop doing a thing that's causing me stress, a thing in my life. And then there's the piece of your perception of it all. How do you balance or look at, for yourself, but also for clients, people out there, something's causing you stress? How much are we going to tweak what you're doing? And how much are we going to tweak how you're reacting, your perception of what you're doing?
Totally. Great question. And I would say I didn't even believe sweat yoga was causing me stress. I thought it was helping me because when I'd go there, it was my sanctuary, right? But it was causing my body stress, and my belief that it was good for me was overtaking my body telling me that it was causing bodily stress, right? And when I was at the Pachna Karma, when I was leaving on my exit interview with my consultant, I'll never forget, I asked her, because we knew that was the reason why there was a site. I was like, so how often can I go back to sweat yoga? And she looks at me and she smiles and she goes, on your birthday. And I was like, and she goes, and notice your reaction. And so to answer your question, my two tools that I use for trying to maneuver all this, and it's curiosity and levity. So now I bring curiosity internally to anytime something is stressing me. Why is it? What's the story that I am telling myself that's causing it to stress me? Because there's always a story, right?
Yeah.
And then levity and laughter and compassion, because the reason why I have that story is from something prior that I needed for survival, because it's a stuck thing inside of me. And I think it's a great time to share a map of what happens when something stresses you, right? If there is an external perceived trigger or stress, if you were to map out your body, what is actually happening beneath that perception, there's an emotion. And directly connected to that emotion is a physical sensation that is stuck in your body, right? And all that external perceived trigger is trying to get you to pay attention to the thing that's stuck in your body, because I believe in this simulation, it's all a reflection of what's happening inside. Everything is a mirror to get us to feel more inside, right? And so I give the analogy, I used to have stage fright. Stage fright's a very common thing. Get on a stage or about to public speak and you have knots in your stomach. And people think, and I thought, that those knots in my stomach came because I am on a stage. When the reality is, you created that stage to feel this knot or stuck sensation in your stomach. And to get one layer deeper and geek out a bit, on a quantum level, an emotion is a scalar sound wave. There's no such thing as a good or bad emotion. We're meant as humans to feel all the emotions. That scalar sound wave of an emotion is supposed to go through you, right? However, if the nervous system cannot process or handle it in that moment, or more often than not, it's during our formative years when our actual brain is still oscillating in theta, our formative frontal cortex hasn't been formed, so we actually don't know how to process it, right? That the nervous system splits, you go into that beta sympathetic state, and that scalar sound wave that's supposed to go through you freezes. And if you think of a glacier, forms a glacier in the fascia in our skin in a shape. And so all we are doing, an incredible book, The Body Keeps Score. Have you read it?
Haven't read it, but I know it's very popular.
Very popular book. And it just states that we are essentially an akashic record of all of our traumas and past life traumas, if you believe, that we are just reliving in this adult meat suit, right? And so the whole point of this educational simulation is to feel all those stuck glaciers, which are a scalar sound wave of an emotion. And all they want is to be felt, and that glacier melts, and then the emotion moves through you. And then whatever perceived trigger happens, and instead of being on that stage and feeling knots, you're on the stage and you feel nothing. That charge has moved through you, right? And so one of the basis of my work ends up being somatic meditation and somatic awareness, right? I like to say, and I got this from one of my mentors, Michaela Grace, training to be an emotional athlete, right? Because we train so hard to be physical athletes, but if you believe that all of this is a projection of your mind, actually the most important thing then is to train to have agency on it out there, to train to be an emotional athlete.
I think a lot about this. I remember when I lived in Boulder during college, me and my roommates set up a slack line in our yard. Slacklining was like kind of new at the time and definitely a big thing in Boulder. And one day we set it up. First day we set it up, and I'm like, let's just lay it on the ground. I want to like see what it's like to walk on a rope that's 3 inches wide. Not a big deal. You just walk on a rope across the ground, or like put a 2x4 on the ground and you just like walk across it. There's nothing to it. But then you put it up between a tree and it's 3 feet off the ground. It's like, oh, okay, a little bit harder now and a little bit of stability. You got to figure this out. But let's say you were to take a 2x4 and run that between two trees, 3 feet off the ground. You'd still be able to walk over it, but there'd be a little bit of this perception of like, if I fall, like I could twist my ankle. Maybe there's some rocks there. I don't want to fall. But if you put that up like 300 feet in the air, nothing's changed from it being on the grass to 3 feet to 300 feet. But all of a sudden, like, you can't walk across that 2x4. It's a complete weird perception thing. So how do we tie that into this concept of being like an emotional athlete?
It is such a beautiful example. And I have been working with a sports agency because they noticed that every Hall of Fame athlete, like the legends, not just a typical athlete, the one correlation between the Hall of Famers of like a Tom Brady, Odell Beckham, Michael Jordan, insanely high HRVs. Why? Because when you are in a sympathetic fight or flight state, you don't have access to your frontal cortex and all the muscle memory from all the practices and everything you've done.
Yep.
So when Michael Jordan will go take that free throw, he wasn't stressed in the limbic state. He was accessing his muscle memory that he had tried 1,000 times. When Derek Jeter's up at a plate, like ninth inning, he's literally in a calm state. And then at that point, it's all the front of your brain accessing stuff that you've already practiced like it's nothing. So in your example,
you say that first time I competed in jiu-jitsu.
Yep.
Got up to the competition day, high stress, forgot everything I learned.
Of course.
Like years of training, forgot everything I learned and got completely obliterated. And then went back the next day and fought the same guy at the gym for fun. And like I beat him then. It was the weirdest thing ever. I never heard it described in such a scientific manner.
And that's actually what's happening. And it's so, and that limbic brain, that back of your brain, that sympathetic state is there for survival. Think of like a hospital. If there's an emergency, every door and everything closes to protect the person. But if there's a tornado and people need to escape, that's the wrong thing to do.
Yeah.
But our body doesn't know the difference. And so it thinks it's life or death when it's not, right? And so being an emotional athlete is being able to realize that and stay in that parasympathetic front of your brain instead of dropping into the limbic back part of your brain, so that you can actually use all the beautiful memory and lessons and everything you've done and go hit the free throw and go hit the ball, the home run, whatever it is.
Is it a feature or a bug of the human body to do that?
Yeah. So I believe evolution is always happening for you. So it's definitely not a bug. There was a reason for it and we have it. It's just we need to bring the agency and awareness to utilize it right.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And that's the same thing with our ego. Like people say you need to kill the ego. That's dissonant to me. To me, it's befriending it because like I shared with you, the reason why the story is happening or the trigger is happening or you're creating that reality, like that stress comes from a place earlier in your life where you actually needed that, right? Yep. Maybe like everybody has their traumas and stories. Like it's a protector, right? So it doesn't mean that it's wrong. It just means you are a different version of yourself. You're still accessing the earlier hardware, but you're in a future version hardware and it just hasn't been integrated and upgraded.
Yeah. I have kind of a bizarre question, and maybe there's specific examples and stories you could share. You can keep them anonymous if you'd like. Or we make one up, but maybe it's just the logical side of the masculine in me, which is like, okay, I live a rather stressful life. Over the last decade, I've gotten a lot better at managing my stress, but I'm not perfect by any means. Can you walk me through what my life looks like, and me being me or any client in there, what my life looks like today, just day to day, how I feel, what I'm doing, what's coming to me, what I'm putting out there, all that. What does my life look like today? And then if I start understanding my HRV and I implement all these new practices, like what's the prescription there? And then what is my life going to look like on the other side? Like what's the promised land here?
Great question. There's not like one prescription for that, but what I can promise is, and why I love HRV so much, if people start utilizing it as a mechanism and as a feedback loop, you will start to realize and have a relationship with your story that you enjoy more, right? And so that doesn't mean that all the stress that you have is going to go away. Like when my shoulder I went from 30 to 95, I still had all the pain in my shoulder, right? It's still there. It's just my relationship to it happening for me changes. And the second you shift that, miracles start to happen because that's the whole reason why it happened. The body is always speaking to us. If you don't listen, it will speak louder and louder and louder. And so HRV is a tool to learn to listen so that it doesn't speak as loud. And you still do all the things that you perceive as stressful throughout the day and change that relationship to, oh no, this is actually supporting my journey to be a better version of me. And no better practice or resistor than partnership and relationship. I mean, they're the biggest mirrors, right? Yeah. Because they're the ones asking you, depending on the relationship, to step more in the feminine and the things that you don't know. And so there's going to be a shit ton of triggers there, right? And if both parties go at it consciously, right? I've been doing couples therapy and around like HRV and just nervous system regulation. And it's just so funny, the stories that each side tell that are direct mirrors. They're saying the same thing, but a different flavor of ice cream. I like to say that, like, just so that they can understand and see that in them, right? And so once you have that awareness, that's what I see the biggest change in people before and after, right? You just are, you're the actor, the director, the screenwriter in your stage play of your life, and HRV supports you bringing agency to all of those.
Mm. Beautifully said. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't wait to like see what my life looks like on the other side. And the word that comes up for me that I'm thinking is like, I'll just be happier.
Yeah.
I'll just lead a happier day-to-day existence, probably feel more joy more often.
Mm-hmm.
I loved how you framed it of, blanking on the exact words you used, apologies, but essentially on the lines of like just the way that you experience what's going on, the way that you perceive what's going on.
Your relationship with it.
And it's like I could dislocate my shoulder yesterday and be totally bummed about it and like basically self-sabotage or whatever. Or I could dislocate my shoulder tomorrow and just be like, all right, cool. Like,
what is this trying to tell me?
What is this telling me? What do I learn from this? And like keep moving forward and just happier life.
Yeah. And I like the word happy. I'm cautious how much I use that because everybody has different definitions of it, right? And but I agree with that word. And an analogy to support with some of the stress that I like using that hits especially on the masculine side. Did you ever play the game Super Mario?
Yeah, sure.
Of course. Love that game. At the end of every level, the music will get a little scary because the big bad Bowser was coming, right?
Yeah.
And all you ever had to do to defeat Bowser was either jump on him or hit him 3 times. And on the other side always was some good music, a flag, and a level up.
Yeah.
Always.
And Peach.
Yeah. This educational simulation is literally like Mario. Bowsers are stressors that come up, big ones, small ones. All you ever have to do isn't ignore, suppress the stressor. It's go through, feel the stressor, realize it. And on the other side, no matter what, is some good music, a level up, and a flag. Because I guarantee you, if you were to actually do an audit of every challenging thing that happened in your life and look now, you would be grateful for it because it caused a shift and got you exactly where you are. Always. Yeah. In the micro, it's very hard when you're in the dural tube of the tunnel, but if you zoom out, it's always happening for you.
Yeah.
Right? And usually the bigger the challenge, the bigger the other side of the upside is and the joy on the other side. Yeah. Right? So it's just your relationship to it.
I have a slightly adjacent question. I remember vividly, I was 26, I want to say. And I just gotten dumped, blindsided.
Mm-hmm.
I was very upset.
Mm-hmm.
I was feeling a lot of intense emotion. And about 6 days goes by, and I meet up with one of my friends who had won his ex-girlfriend back. They're still together to this day. I was like, dude, Ryan, I need your advice. How do I win my ex-girlfriend back? This has been the worst 6 days I've had since my last breakup.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe we're meant to be together and all this stuff. And he meets me for lunch, and I'm all frantic and whatever, and we're talking about it, and he's listening, and finally it's his time to speak, and he kind of breathes. He's also 26, and I'm like, very profound for 26-year-old guys. He goes, just feel it. Like, just let yourself feel what you're feeling. And it might be months or a year, but like, just feel it. Okay. So that was quite a few years ago. I don't think that clicked for me until probably 1 or 2 years ago. And so I'm curious, for men who have never been taught how to do that, never even really been told, just feel what you're feeling. You don't have to necessarily talk about it. You don't have to communicate it, but just feel it. Well, we're so used to just like, oh no, bad feeling. I need to get rid of this. I don't want to feel this. So like do everything I can to get rid of it. Go to the gym, drink, whatever it is. How do you just feel what you're feeling? And maybe it's lasting for weeks or months and so much longer than you want it to.
Man.
How do you just let it move through you, knowing that like this is the right way to do it. This is the healthy way to do it.
Such a beautiful question. And thank you for sharing that vulnerably. And it has been my biggest challenge and most men's biggest challenge to feel because of everything that you just said, right? And for me, and a very analytical, logical thinker, knowing that HRV was good for me and gonna be a barometer that like supports my longevity, focusing on that and improving that, I was as dedicated to doing so. And at the end of the day, the best way to do that is to feel. So I would train to be an emotional athlete. And my morning practice involves literally just doing nothing other than feeling sensations in my body. That's somatic awareness, right? So there's no shortcuts to actually feeling. You need to pause and actually just do it, which is so tough, especially for men who think that they're not supposed to do that and think they need to be doing, to just stop and feel.
And does that mean like sit on the couch with the lights off and just like
It could for some. For some, it could be dancing. For some, it could be swimming. For some, it could be singing. There's so many meditation. Like people think meditation is just sitting in silence and not thinking. First off, it's impossible not to think, and that's not what meditation is. Meditation is being aware of your thoughts, right, and not being lost in the thought. And so it could show up in any way, depending on the person, whatever resonates most with them to just get in their body. People like dancing gets people in their body sometimes more than anything, right? Singing gets people in their body. Sitting still and feeling sometimes gets, it depends on the person and what works. But giving it energy and having an intention to do so is the first step. And so just carving out time. And for me, knowing I wanted to improve HRV and seeing it start to improve by doing this was the motivation for me over the past 6 years to slowly get to this point where now I can do it.
What are some common stories and questions that you get these days in the work that you're doing?
Yeah. There's a lot. I think sometimes people ask like, what do you do? And I like to say, my only job is to regulate my nervous system, which is true because I believe everything out here is just a reflection of you. And so the best way you could actually change anybody, because you can't change anybody, is just to embody the thing that you want to be. I find so much in my work, because I'm fortunate enough to work with like very high performers. The thing that we do the most is the thing we need the most. Always, right? It's so funny. Like our biggest passion and purpose is actually, if we pause to think about it and just ask ourselves, it's the thing the little kid in us like actually wants the most, right? And so along my journey, I would always, when I got too much in my head, I'd ask myself this geeky engineering question of what is systematically responsible for the electric signal that causes my heart to beat, that causes your heart to beat, that causes everybody's heart to beat. And science has very much proven it's not the brain, it's not the heart, or it's not the blood, it's not your breath. They actually have proven everything it's not and haven't proven what it is, right? My truth or my belief to that is it is God or source or consciousness or love or Allah or whatever you want to call the thing that's greater than us, the creator, right? And that means that heartbeat is the entrance of where we all come from, and I believe where we all go to, right? The heart also happens to be the center of the nervous system. The nervous system, which is an electric system, right? I believe then acts as this bridge between where we all come from and go back to, and this manifested reality that we create with our thought and our senses, right? And I believe our soul's journey, the only thing we need to do in this incarnation is clear this electric system to allow our actual self to come through. And we all have our own artistic, unique version of expressing ourselves. And if we clear that system, it will come through and continue co-creating this like magic paradise we're in. And what is stuck in that system, that electric system? Emotions, all those scalar sound waves. And so all any of us actually need to do is feel, is go in and move all this stuck feeling so that we can go out there and continue allowing our authentic self to come through. And what is HRV? It's measuring how stuck those electric emotions are in the system, right? So the higher the HRV score you have, the more clear that nervous system is for you to go be the thing that you are meant to be.
It's funny because I'm like sitting here listening and half thinking, what am I going to do differently this weekend? Just like the next 2 days to start to take a little bit more steps in this direction.
Yeah.
It's funny.
And I think the biggest advice that I could give, and I just started with a new client today, become crystal clear on what your purpose and intention is. And I know people hear that word purpose and they're like, oh man, that's like, I don't know what my purpose is. And a purpose can evolve and change, right? But just at least in this present moment, understand why you're doing what you're doing, or else you're literally like 99% of the world just out there doing with no intention.
What are some of the most exciting answers you've gotten to that question?
It varies. I'll share mine, which it took me a while with my coach to really distill. And my purpose is to increase consciousness by being love, right? And love for me is expressing my truth. And I love to, like, I'm a geek. I love learning how things work. And then I love sharing it with other people. Hence why I'm in my purpose by sharing my passion for HRV, which then in turn will increase consciousness because it's also a measure of your agency, right? So I think it's important for people to just understand and have like a crystal clear vision of why they're doing what they're doing. And then if you, it sounds simple, but if you actually just take that into what you do, the overwhelmment and stress, it's not that they don't come, it's just that they come and they get met with this clarity on how to handle it and that it's happening for you. And then things just start to happen miraculously.
I would assume, based off your answer, what your purpose is, that it took a lot of work and iteration and inward thought to get there. It wasn't just like you sat down and did one journal entry and that's your answer.
You'd be spot on with that assumption.
Yeah. So I assume, also another assumption, let's push on this one if need be, but like probably 99% of men out there and listeners of this show and whomever else, they probably ask themselves, what's my purpose? And their answer might be like one layer below the surface, like to, I don't know, be a good husband or be a good dad or make a lot of money or build homes for the poor, whatever it is. That's like 7 or 8 chapters more shallow than your answer. So how can men start to deepen and go deeper, just thicken and go much deeper into what their purpose is beyond just, and it's like great if your starting point is like to build homes for the poor. Yeah. Awesome. You just keep
totally
pushing through
and
it.
I love every one that you gave because that has been a flavor of my purpose at some chapter. And just because the purpose statement I said does not mean I don't do all those other things, right? It's just that is my guiding light.
Yeah, that's a part of the thing that you shared.
Totally. And so the first is actually just sitting and saying, oh yeah, my purpose is to be a better husband, right? Okay, how do you be a better husband? And also, let's just look at that. To be a better husband, that's a purpose for something outside of you. And that thing outside of you is just a reflection in a mirror for you. So try to, when you're questioning and unraveling what your purpose could be, ensuring that it's something for you that you have control over. Because you actually don't have control over how being a better husband looks for your partner, right? Whoever your partner is, because you can't change your partner. You can't make them happy. You can't make them mad. Although it can perceive that you do that. It's all based on their projection and relationship with you. Your partner could have had the worst day ever. You get home, you think you're doing the best thing for them, and they're like, and they just go into a rant, even though you just did the best thing. It has nothing to do with what you're doing and everything to do with their relationship. So the only thing you actually can't control is you. That's why I say you need to embody the thing that you want to bring into the world, the thing that you want to do the most, because that's actually all any of us are here to do. And when you embody it, we are all electromagnetics. Like our heart is the largest magnet. We emit a frequency and a signal that will attract the people that are supposed to be in your life. It will be a mirror for the people that it'll be on them if they want to stay with you in that and learn and grow, or if it's dissonant to them where they're at. And you need to not have any attachment to what the outcome is and just know who you are and act and embody that.
How come so many men don't know who they are?
It's a great question. And I myself, a lot of the times, question that when I get into the story throughout the day. The only time I ever know who I am is during my morning practice when I'm sitting and fully connected. The rest of the day, we're all just in this game together, right? And I don't think it's important. Yes, it's important to know who you are, but it all goes back to that quote I shared. It's like, what is your intention for why you are doing what you're doing, right? And as long as you are aligned in that, it's all story. I believe at the end of the day, all of this is just story, right? So why are you playing in this story? And if you know that, it just helps guide the story so much. And one thing I wanted to share, I got hit because you said assume so many times, and I love it. I'm a big fan of etymology and the meaning behind words. And I believe there's so many different meanings of so many different words as you evolve and learn more. And I'm going to give my mentor, Michaela, she gave me some like codes around like there's the word humor, right? Hue, more. Hue, color, more. Humor brings more color into a world full of light, right? Just like a funny little, it's hidden there that nobody knows. And I just started geeking out about all that. And during a visit, I go to a lot of like temples and sacred sites and do meditations. I was at one and I flashed on the word assume, and I saw it broken up into 3 words. As, su, me. And I got curious what su means. And the Latin origin of the word su is in. As, in, me. Mm-hmm. It was one of my body. I get the truth bumps. I say anytime I say it. I was like, wow. I grew up always thinking assume is don't make an ass out of you and me, right? But actually, there's a hidden meaning, as in me. Anytime I assume something, that's actually in me, which makes sense because this is all mirrors. So instead of judging, and I'm a New Yorker, so my mind judges pretty fast. Now when I do that, I pause and I'm like, wow, I created that person. Where is that piece that I am judging in me that I need to bring curiosity and light to, and levity and compassion, so that I can heal and feel that part because it came up because there's something inside of me, and it just totally changed how I go about the life.
Yep. I think the example that always comes into my head when I think of these scenarios is I'm in traffic. A little road rage as a New Yorker as well. And someone cuts me off and I'm like, oh, this dick. And it's like, he's just him. He's no different than who he was 8 milliseconds prior to that. But now I've assumed, I've created this version of this guy who sucks, which I have to carry the weight of that the rest of my day. That's just almost like self-destructive to me. And I carry that. And if I'm driving down Lincoln during rush hour here in LA, like from point A to my destination, I'm a pretty shitty person by the time I get there. I don't feel very good about where I'm at and how I did that. So do you have any hacks, if you will? I know there's no hacks in life, I believe in that, but like maybe we use the phrase like tips and tricks.
Yeah. It's like
just like,
what do you do in those moments?
Yeah, it's almost a silly question of like, how do you just like not let things stress you out so much?
Yeah, it's the 2 words I said, curiosity and levity. So in that moment when you're on Lincoln and you curse or you say whatever in your head, when you catch yourself, like pause and be like, that's interesting. I just did that. Why did I do that? Where in my body is there a feeling? Because I guarantee you, if you were to go into your body and drop into a somatic practice, there's some charge somewhere in your body, right? And if you just focus on that and physically describe it, that's my version of somatic, is not say I feel a tension or I feel a knot or I feel a pain. It's like, no, I feel a pulsing vibration in my lower left abdominal that's now starting to creep up to my left breast. Like physically describe the sensation, taking out the mind label of traffic or whatever discomfort. Magically, that stuck scalar sound wave of an emotion that's a glacier will start to melt, and then that charge will go away, and then the same thing will happen. I'll just be like, that story is gone. I'm smiling. I'm in Lincoln, and I'm thinking of whatever else, right?
Would have been some profound impacts that I'll actually change the word impacts. I'd like to pick a different word. What was the word you used to etymology?
Etymology.
Yeah, I want to be more selective with the words I use so that it's more concise and more direct about what I'm trying to ask. I'm curious what big shifts or things have entered your life, miracles, if you will, in the last couple of years as you've developed and really deepened this practice.
Yeah, I think my shoulder injury was hands down one of the biggest gifts. On my birthday this last year, I went to my friend who orchestrated the whole thing and giving me the bike and said, I was reflecting on this last year and I just wanted to thank you for the best birthday gift you've ever given. And she was like, I'm like, no, I'm actually dead serious.
Yeah.
It was the best gift that could have ever happened.
The strength and like seeing the positive in it.
Yeah. Even though it led to the downfall of the beverage, at least for a while, it ended up, I let it go thinking bankruptcy and everything. And then a holding company came and they did an APA. So they purchased the brand and the asset, but all the debt stayed on the company, which fell on my shoulder. So I had to go through bankruptcy. All these things happened. So death financially, death physically, death, my whole ego and what I was, the co-founder of this beverage company for a decade. Everybody knows me. All just totally wiped. Talk about being humbled, right? while I had started like sharing HRV and saying like, oh yeah, regulating your nervous system. Well, I got asked to walk the walk, right? You got to walk the walk. You got to embody the thing that you want to bring into the world because it's the thing you need the most because you are the world. The world is you. So really just being super conscious of like the story that I am saying at all times and an awareness of what's happening. And it's the curiosity and levity like amidst that to just support in the journey that we're all on every day, all the time.
To start to wrap up a little bit, curious, what is the best question you've been asked recently? And what's the best piece of advice that you've gotten recently?
You've asked some very good questions.
Oh, thanks. I love asking questions.
Yeah. No, I got asked recently a question that for me at least was challenging, and had me like spinning on how challenging it was. And it was like, what do you desire? Right. And I feel like for me as a man and as so much of my story being like supporting and caregiving and all the things, like it just opened up my eyes to how little I have actually like spent into like contemplating things that like I desire, that like I want. And it was asked from a female. And so it was just fascinating how my body responded to that question, and that like I didn't even have it like, whereas when I asked her, it was like, oh yeah, I have all these desires. And like for me, it's like, man, I really haven't been listening or like ever contemplated like, what do I desire? Right. And this was in like a romantic like relationship. So it was a profound question and really just opened up for me just how little attention I've given to me in that situation when it comes to a romantic partner. And I mean, it's a theme of all of my past partners, this like sacrifice and always like putting that first, which isn't because of that's all me. Like I was 100% responsible, for that. My last partner, like I say, she's been my best medicine because it really showed me like how much of that story and projection that I was giving. And that's not going to change until you change yourself and change that story with yourself. So it just, spun me on a beautiful loop of curiosity. Yeah.
Best advice you've been given recently?
Best advice I have been given recently. Two things come to mind. One, I just love the advice one of my best friends had given, and this was a while ago. She lighten up on your road to enlightenment. And I am someone who is just, I have a very regimented, disciplined, like focused, like version, like most masculine entrepreneurs. And at the end of the day, that's why I say curiosity and levity now. Like it's always going to work out. And the whole point isn't the destination. It's the most cliche thing. It's the journey.
Yeah.
And so if you aren't enjoying the journey, if you aren't having fun in the journey to build the thing, you're missing the point of why you're building the thing, right?
Yeah.
Because the destination is never promised. And as we just saw from what's happening in LA now, like everything can be taken away from you in an instant. Why are you doing it if you're not enjoying it, right?
Yeah.
So to really just enjoy, have as much like awareness to every moment and appreciate all the gifts and the beauty and the mirrors that come into your life, and just, gratitude for it.
Take it. Last question. In the spirit of this show, what do you think it means to be a man today?
Such a good question. And that's something that I'm very much maneuvering and trying to embody as much as possible. I think to be a man, vulnerability, strength, being able to hold space for the feminine, and do so in a way that does not sacrifice who you are, right? So really just, this is such a deep question. I think being a man is just embodying who, as a man, you are, who you want to be, and just having that strength to speak your truth, and knowing when to like put down the ego and be vulnerable when you're wrong, and to just swim in that dance, with the feminine, to tap into your feminine, because we all are masculine and feminine, and our journey is to unite both of them. Like, I believe Tantra is like, people think of Tantra, they just think of sex, and sex is a part of Tantra. But I was just in Java, which is the third largest island in Indonesia, and they say the birthplace of Bali, of Tantra, the birthplace of Bali. And like the essence of Tantra is divine unity of the masculine and the feminine, right? And that's what we're all striving to, because that's non-dualism, right? We live in a dualistic world, and we're striving to get to a place where masculine and feminine are one in us. And the best way to do that is to have a mirror of everything that you need there, so that it could push you more in. And so to just be respectful, and be chivalrous, and all those things along your journey, is what I believe. Yeah.
Awesome. Super grateful for you coming on here today, dude. Thank you. This was really fun.
Yeah. Thank you for having me, man.
Yeah,
And
man.
thank you for doing this show. It's super important. I believe in that. And I wish 10 years ago there was something like this that I could have listened to.
Yeah.
Because it would have made a lot of the beautiful challenges probably learn much faster.
I appreciate that. How
Yeah.
can people find you on the internet?
My handle is that HRV guy. THAT HRV guy. That's the social media, the website, all the things. So feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Thank you, my man.
Thank you, man.
Appreciate
Pleasure.
you. This was great.
Yeah.